This is House Planning Help, episode 249. Hello, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build, because I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Coming up in this session, my guest is Danny Luhde-Thompson, and we're going to get a build story today. We always love these. It's quite an interesting area as well where he lives. It's in my home county as well of Hertfordshire. Beautiful village, but this particular area has a lot of construction going on, and Danny's house, it stands out like a beacon. It's striking, it's contemporary, and then you open the front door, it's just wow. It's got quite tall ceilings, very nicely laid out interior design wise, and then the glazing takes you through into the garden. It's a passive house, they've got some renewables going on, and you're going to hear the whole story today, so I look forward to sharing that with you in due course. Quick mention for the AECB conference. It's their 30th anniversary conference as well, called Building Solutions to the Climate Crisis. It's going to be at Oxford Brookes University. And yes, this is actually an industry event, but I say as a self-builder, get along there. You're going to learn so much. You're under no pressure to meet people, but you might end up meeting some really well-qualified builders, architects, and so forth, and probably some just interesting people. I was having a look through the program just now, and I said, oh, Charlie Luxton's on there. We were doing some filming with Charlie earlier in the year, but yeah, all sorts of fascinating people. Brenda Boardman, who was in our documentary, The Future of Housing, she's there too. So the AECB, even if this has been and gone, they put on some really good events, and the emphasis is always there. It's always with climate change in the forefront, also trying to make buildings comfortable, energy efficient, what we love to talk about on this podcast. So we'll put a link in the show notes today if you're interested in coming along to that. I want to do a quick thank you to Tom Grieford, who's helped me set up today's interview, because he was actually the architect on this project. And it's one that I saw and thought, oh, this looks interesting. It's funny sometimes, you see pictures in magazines, and I get to go and visit these houses, and they often feel different to how you think they're going to. But this was just in a very interesting location where there's a lot going on the streets, lots of building, lots of construction. And this house just stands out. It looks great, looks timber-clad, contemporary. And then as you come through into the house, some of that theme is going. They've got quite high ceilings, which it makes it very dramatic. And the interior design's very good. The garden, I don't know whether I was arriving at a good time of year, but even just walking in the front door, you're taken right through to the garden. So a lot to dig into in this case study today with Danny Luhde-Thompson. I started by asking him when he first thought about building a house.
Well, I was actually looking to move back to Wales. This is years and years ago now. I originally come from Wales, and it was a very old stone farmhouse, with the ice on the inside of the windows. And so one of my first concerns was obviously having lots of insulation and not being cold again. And then when I started looking into it, you realise it's not just the insulation, it's the air tightness, it's the thermal bridging, it's having the windows in the right places and all that sort of thing. And then the obvious standard that popped up was obviously Passivhaus. And back at that time, there were none in this country that I'm aware of, and none of the builders knew anything about it. So obviously if you were going to do it, you had to learn a lot about it yourself. So I think I bought the Excel spreadsheet, had a quick play, and quickly realised it was pretty daunting. But anyway, as things transpired in the end, we decided, with my job in London, we decided to stay here and redevelop our existing house instead. And part of the reason behind that was I'd spent years trying to make the house perform better. So, you put insulation in the loft, that made a huge difference. But then you realise that the concrete floors are just on the earth and they're never going to be warm. And there are so many drafty bits that you just couldn't fix. And in particular, I think there was one flat roof section, which was a ventilated flat roof, which you couldn't actually insulate. And it was just cold, and there was absolutely nothing you could do about it. So obviously, the idea came about to redevelop the house we have here in Harpenden as a passive house.
Can you describe the old house?
It was a 60s bungalow, so it's quite large, but sort of very spread out with quite a lot of little rooms, and we wanted a sort of more open family space.
Was this a renovation or starting again?
When we originally moved into the house, we did redecorate it and we did renovate it a fair bit. And it's when you do that, you realise there's all the compromises that have been made in the building. There's lots of things you can try and fix, but fundamentally, like I was saying, the wall to floor junction, there's really not a lot you can do about it, bar dig it all out. So I think at the point where I realised that we were going to rebuild it, we obviously stopped doing any of the renovation work and put all our efforts into planning a new house. So I think we spent, it must have been 5 or 6 years on planning the house that we were going to be in. And, we found an architect who we liked the look of their work, very contemporary design. And yeah, that was it.
How about actually knowing that you're going to be able to do this? Because can you just knock down a house and rebuild it? What?
Yes. So I'd bought this farmhouse in Wales, which I'd originally planned to redevelop. And even though it came with planning permission, it probably shouldn't really have had planning permission because nobody had lived there for 15 years or something. So we already had a big battle with the planning department. It ended up going to full planning committee and we put years of effort and we eventually got our planning permission. Then, deciding that we weren't going to move there after all. So we already knew that building a contemporary home in this area was going to be a bit of a challenge. So the first thing we did was to find a planning consultant who went through the local development plan, the LDP, and basically made sure that our house fully complied with their criteria, in terms of distances from all the different boundaries. And actually how the house looks is not actually specified in the plan at all. So that's, people can object.
Well, of course it's not. People but planning is just,
So it was good to have submit our planning application knowing that there was no real ground on which it could be refused. And actually, ironically, the local council wanted to refuse it because they said it was a low quality design. And obviously being a passive house, from my perspective, it was the highest possible quality design you could have. In terms of you're supposed to have, PV and all this sort of stuff. But in the end, if you don't actually need heating, it doesn't get any better than that. So I was a bit annoyed that they called it a low quality design, but in the end that didn't matter and it passed first time. But I was very glad to have got a planning consultant involved.
Well, what was the process then with a planning consultant? Did you just say to them, this is what we're trying to do, and then they went away? Or what information did they need from you?
No, they collaborated with the architect quite closely. So the architect, that was Nicholas Tye at the time, they took on board all the concerns from the planner and, moved things around to make sure that it would all fit. So actually the original house was much further into the garden. So we actually had to bring the house closer towards the road. Actually, that was because of the sight line with the next door house, and that's because next door's house was actually built in the wrong place. So ironically, because we were rebuilding our house, we had to move our house to fit in line with their house. So it did make the front of the house a bit compressed in terms of space to park cars and what have you, but we got more garden. So in the end, it worked out.
And the garden is fantastic. We'll maybe talk about that in a second. So you're also increasing the space. So was it a case that lots of your neighbours were redeveloping their houses, so going up wasn't such an issue?
The house opposite was 2 stories, and the street next to us, we're at the end of our street, is also 2 stories. And actually, the adjoining house is one of the 2-story houses. So the main thing we had to keep in mind was how tall the house was. I think it had to be below 6.5 meters, which is our neighbour's house. Well, that's kind of what we aimed at. I don't think there was actually a rule about it, but obviously something we wanted to stay below. And having moved houses a few times before, I don't think the Marie Kondo book had come out quite then, but certainly we had got into clearing a lot of stuff from the loft and realizing actually we don't use very much of this stuff. So we took the opportunity to say, well, actually, we don't even need a loft, which means we don't need a pitched roof. And what we really wanted was that feeling of space and having the nice tall ceilings. And by having a flat roof, we could fit that all in. So I think in the original plan, we had, 2.9 meter downstairs ceiling heights and a little bit less upstairs. But that's something that we really wanted.
And there's certainly a lot of wow factor in the design, from just coming in through the front door, being able to see all the way through the house, those tall ceilings. What did you want then from this contemporary design? What was on the brief?
Gosh,
If you can remember.
I was very involved in the technical aspects of the design. I mean, obviously things like the view all the way through, the welcoming entrance area, but with the mudroom off to the side that you can stick all your coats and things in. So we wanted a very uncluttered, sort of very contemporary, simple approach to the house. And I guess we were trying to minimize the number of materials. So we've got ash floors, we've got some ash cladding, and then some color just to break it up. But we wanted that sort of contemporary, simple feeling, but still be warm and welcoming and, able to be lived in by a family. So, not too clean or have surfaces which would horribly show fingerprints straight away. But fortunately, my wife and I did a good job of splitting up parts of the brief. So I worked on the fabric and the passive house and the services, and my wife did most of the interior design. I mean, along with the architect, but she took care of all the finishes and all the things that we were going to put in the house.
It's always interesting how couples work together. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it with my wife, and it all worked very nicely. So were there any moments, or would you say once you'd allocated different responsibilities?
Fortunately, I can't remember anything that we had a particular conflict about. I mean, maybe the size of the garage, but overall, no, it worked out very well.
Take us through how you decided to build this house then, choose the system that you're going to go with and some of those choices.
Right. So I guess we got all, once you have planning permission, you need to move on to think about, apart from obviously working out how you're going to finance it, moving on to the next stage of the detailed design. And I think at that point, we realized that we needed an architect which had actual experience of doing detailed design of a passive house, and ideally with a certified passive house technician in-house. We had BRE as an external consultant, but they're really geared towards much bigger developments, not really single residential houses. But the problem is, again, when I first started looking at a house in Wales, BRE were the only certifiers in the whole country. That just shows how much it's changed now. Now there must be hundreds and hundreds. So at the detailed design stage, the project moved to Grieford Architects. And then I worked with Fran, their passive house designer, on detailing all the design. And I think it was our project manager who recommended Grieford. So we found Mike Jacob, and he recommended Grieford as having just built another passive house. And they were using the Irish timber frame manufacturers MBC. So I love the simplicity that they could supply the passive foundation system, and they could deliver the airtight timber frame shell before they got paid. And obviously, because they do it all the time, they're not even worried about passing. And when I'd first looked at Passive House, and having worked on building sites as a child, I could imagine it would be impossible to have an airtight house with traditional builders, just the way they go about things.
Now, one of the things when you want to go passive house is often those technical details you want to know from the beginning. So did anything have to change with the designs that you had, those initial outline designs?
Actually, the main thing that changed was there was originally a lot of glazing on the south side. So actually the glazing had to be reduced by about 50%.
Because you wouldn't know. It doesn't. You go in there and feel this house does not have any windows.
The architect, to be fair, was very clever about making that work. So they took advantage of breaking up, because we had a 10-meter span of glass originally, and they broke it up into two sections. And it makes the spaces feel more distinct. And, I think they did a very good job of that. And I think the upper level window in the double height space is actually not as tall as the other one. And they all have external blind systems to help with the overheating.
So how is that controlled then? Is that just when you feel you need to use them, or is it automated?
They should be automated, so they're connected into a BMS system, which I keep meaning to write the programs for. There are manual override switches, but otherwise it can all be done under computer control. I mean, the idea was that the system would know that it's a sunny day the next day and put them down, before the sun comes up, and then, raise them when the sun goes away again. It's very easy to look at a weather forecast and figure out all these things these days. But actually the house has got so much thermal inertia, or the temperature of the house changes pretty slowly. If it's really sunny, you need to get the blinds down, but apart from that, it stays pretty constant.
What other challenges did you have on the build and the specification?
We originally had a typical M&E contractor to do the heating system, but they'd never done a passive house before. and the certifier looked at it and they were very unhappy with it. I think it had a constant hot water loop, and they just said, that's a no-no in a house like this, because the heat loss from that alone will overheat the house. And so that was maybe the only contractor who wasn't really aware of how you need to go about things differently for a passive house. So in the end, I actually did the plumbing design myself. Bit of a learning exercise.
What skills do you bring to the table? You've obviously mentioned writing programs, and now you're doing the plumbing.
I'm a programmer by trade, but in terms of plumbing, a lot of it comes down to flow and pipe sizes and having a single manifold, and then just sizing all the pipes properly, specifying the right levels of insulation. And, I was keen on actually getting involved and doing some of that myself. So, I put on a lot of the insulation, procured a lot of the things, the heat store. One of the things that we wanted in a house that we had in our old house was actually the log burning stove. That was certainly a bit of a challenge to get working in a passive house.
So go on then, take me through the process. My wife was quite adamant that we should have something like this, and I was definitely reluctant. So what has to happen, and how do you look at it now?
Fortunately, there was a passive house certified chimney system. I think it's Schiedel from Germany. So we knew it could be done. But the main problem with having if you're familiar with having a wood burning stove in an insulated room, you quickly realise that it will overheat very quickly. So I was looking for a stove that had very little heat output. But the problem is every burning log is a couple of kilowatts, so you need 2 or 3 burning logs for the fire to keep going. So, the minimum sort of heat output for a stove is around 8 kilowatts. And I didn't want any more than 2, which would be the peak heating load for this house. But the way you get around that is by dumping all the rest of the heat into the water. So we basically went for heat store design, which lets us run the stove for 8 or 9 hours or so before it all gets too hot, and that actually lets you neatly link in a solar water heating array and then an emergency gas boiler. And it was good fun designing all of that in.
And how many times have you used it?
The wood stove we use. In the winter when we're in the house, we use it. I don't know, a few times a week maybe.
That sounds pretty good. That's not bad.
And the gas boiler is basically only used in emergencies. So if it's been dull weather for 3 days and everyone's had a shower, then yes, we put it on for half an hour. But I think we've spent maybe £20 on gas so far this year, for example. So it is pretty minimal. In hindsight, maybe you would just have an immersion heater and save paying the gas standing charge. But then we're on mains gas. So it did seem the sensible thing to have a cheap gas boiler.
Did you connect to mains gas or sort of continue the connection just thinking of a future buyer or something of the house? Were you ever tempted to sever that?
I think now I'd almost be tempted to say you could get away with a gas bottle. But that's only because I object to paying £10 a month for the standing charge. No, I think looking at the problems you have in the countryside, with your LPG tank or oil tanks, things like that. I think it's, and given the gas mains is only 4 meters away in the pavement, it seems sensible to connect it up. But it was a good, because there weren't any other passive houses that I could go and visit. They didn't really exist. We were very conservative. So, for example, I think MPC wanted an extra £1,000 to install an underfloor heating system in the concrete slab, which we didn't think we'd need, but we did anyway, just in case I got my sums wrong. And, we'd be in a cold house and I'd be in a lot of trouble with my family. But,
how do you use that?
I think there are 12 zones downstairs, and we do use it occasionally in my wife's study. Because if you're sitting there working all day, it's nice to have that room a little bit warmer. But, if you ever come to sell the house or whatever, maybe it makes people feel a bit more comfortable with it.
On our tour around, we saw a cat flap, which it looked quite a feat of engineering. So if you're doing this back in the day, was it the only cat flap available, or?
I was actually quite glad that I found this cat flap, because we had several cats and there was absolutely no way that my family were going to give up the cats just to move into an airtight house. There was an American one which with lots of magnets that looked like it would be fairly airtight. But when I found the proper one, then I knew I had to have it. And in fact, I bought that pretty much when I found it, and we got the cats to play with it while we were staying in our rental house, learning how it worked and seeing if it detected their microchip properly. So that was good fun for the cats.
And is it exactly the same as a window, that it just all has to be taped in? And
Yes, it comes with its own seals. So you cut a hole in the door, and then with the right seals and screws, and it's got a massive external bit of insulation and its own triple seal system. Pretty straightforward to install. Needs to be powered, obviously, because it's got a motor and a secure locking mechanism. So it's just more of a detailing issue of how you try and hide all the wires and everything. But I think our electrician did a very good job of that.
Thinking about a couple of the details, you've got a very compact form, I will say, in places, but then you come out of your thermal envelope in the garage, and also you've got a balcony area upstairs. So what extra work did that give you, and what did you learn? Would you have rather had a simple cube form, or was it worth all that? You do need your garage, I know.
The cube form externally looks very simple, very contemporary, but actually from a thermal point of view, it makes it quite complicated, keeping the steels away from the edges, making all of the insulation detailing work. I know it was a bit of a headache for NBC to figure it all out, but worth persevering. And that's one case where I could sort of stand back and let the Passivhaus consultant and the timber frame manufacturer just sort it all out. But it did take them a few weeks of arguing about it.
And how has the garden developed? Because again, it's very impressive. Is it just lots of hours, as I'm finding with mine?
Yes, my wife is a garden designer by trade, though obviously so much of her occupation had been spent on the interior for the house that by the time the hard landscaping people come along, there was a bit of a rush to actually finalise the design. But it was great fun for her to be able to design her own garden and integrate it with the house and the patio and have the sight lines all work.
Kitchen, I don't know whether this falls under her interior design, but you're going to be living in here as a family, so you've got to have your input, even if she's guiding a lot of the interior design. So that you've got concrete worktops.
Yes, well, we both like the Barbican, and there was a particular house which we stole quite a lot of details from, an Australian house. The staircase, in fact, we went to our architect and said, we want our staircase to look exactly like that. And, we found a staircase manufacturer and they delivered exactly like that. But the concrete work surfaces were a way of having that material in our house and in a way that you could touch and feel and use every day. My brother builds kitchens, and my father had actually built the kitchen for our previous bungalow many years ago, which we felt guilty about ripping out, but we did manage to eBay it, and it lives another day in another house. So my brother normally does sort of very traditional Welsh farmhouse kitchens, and so it was a bit of fun to come up with a contemporary design to fit in this house. But yes, we actually mocked it all up in chipboard, walked around it a lot, and to work out the final dimensions and the gaps between all the surfaces, which was actually very, very helpful for before actually casting it.
Well, it sounds like this has all gone swimmingly well. Were there any challenges along the way, or any learnings or anything?
The electrician had worked on passive houses previously. The plumber and the heating engineer hadn't. But everyone was very collaborative in terms of, learning skills with taping things up and what you need to watch. And, if anything goes wrong, you fix it before you cover it up. But I think because we spent so much time on the design up front, and the architect obviously made sure that we didn't make any egregious mistakes with the spaces, but also, the attention to detail from the electrician. It's usually the thing about having all the sockets in the right places, but he was extremely fastidious in making sure that there were enough and that it all worked for us. So I'm actually glad to say that if you do put in the effort up front, it can all work out very well.
And in a couple of places as well, you've been forthright in thinking we don't have to make the final decision now. You were mentioning upstairs in that bathroom, for example. Maybe you could just outline the changes that you made fairly late on, but because you saw something.
Yeah, I suppose there's two examples of that, which I often forget now. The window in my wife's study, when the timber frame went up, we actually decided that it wasn't actually vertically tall enough. So, I think almost literally someone got out the chainsaw and modified the timber frame in place. And, we ordered a different size window to fit it. But there's another
You make that sound so easy. Got out the chainsaw. So
literally, it was 20 minutes or something.
Wow.
It was
all
amazing.
the air tightness and
Fortunately, that was before. Let me think. That was probably after the first air tightness test, but obviously we've had several air tightness tests. As I'm sure most people who've done this will have had issues with their air tightness. Every time the first test, you find lots of leaks, and some of them do come back. But it's good fun running around with the depressurization test, isn't it? And then you can hear all the air come hissing in. But no, there was another example of in our bathroom where we had the stud wall up, and there's actually a really lovely view to the garden. And that was an example of a very late change where we thought, oh, we can actually have an interior window in our bathroom, so you can sit on the loo and look all the way out to the bathroom, to the garden, and that's worked fantastically well. It's brought more light into that room. But I mean, the architect spent hours making sure that the sight lines worked to preserve dignity.
And that big double height space, we might have mentioned it in passing, but it's incredibly impressive. Is there anything that you need to think about when you have a space like that?
In our case, there was enough floor area, and we made sure that we had all the rooms that worked as we wanted to, and we did have a sort of 1.5 height space in our previous house, which we really liked the different feeling of having that. So I mean, that's something that we wanted to keep in the design. And I think as a child, I lived in an army hut, and my parents put in a mezzanine floor for the kids to sleep on. So I always remember hanging down from the balcony over the double height space. So, for me, it was sort of harking back to my childhood a little bit as well.
What tips would you give to someone coming into this? They're just starting, going out on that research stage. What would you like to say to them?
Gosh, I mean, don't rush into building your house. It does pay to go and visit houses, go and visit a passive house if you haven't already, and, see what it feels like. And people will be very happy to give you advice. And I would say listen to it, because I've given advice to people and seen that they haven't taken it. But, there's a lot to take in as well. So, yeah, don't rush, and, have a good architect.
And how does it feel at the end of this? How long have you been in?
I think we've been here 2 years now, I think. But it feels like longer than that. I mean, it felt like home very, very quickly. The kids are running around shouting. We've bashed holes in various things, and we're not at the stage of being precious about everything anymore. It's just a lovely house to be in. You can sit in any part of the house. The cats will sit in any part of the house. Even in the winter when there's snow outside on the patio, they'll be curled up just beside the glass window. So they can't feel that cold outside. They're very happy.
Danny, really appreciated chatting to you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
With each interview, we provide show notes. Today, you can find them at houseplanninghelp.com/249. Packing in the information, we've got the summary, we've got the photos, we've also got the links. I know Danny was keen to add a few resources for chimneys. If you're going down that route in a low energy building, you'll find the show notes very useful today. We'll link you to Tom Grieford. There's a good article about this project on Passivhaus Plus, so we'll link you across to that. houseplanninghelp.com/249. Couple of things to finish up on today. Firstly, my garden fund. I haven't mentioned this for a little while, but when you get towards the end of a project, it is possible you might run out of money. We managed to get into the house, which is good. Finished most of the interior decoration, a few pictures still to put up, but we're largely there. It's outside that is slacking, hence the garden fund. So I would love to get some more shrubs, plants in there to make it seem like the lush garden that I hope it will be one day. I'm spending every spare hour at the moment going out there, digging out thistles and so forth. Anyway, the garden fund is largely to try and drum up more business at Regen Media. As with everything I do, I'm trying to base it in construction and also promoting best practice, sustainable methods. So if you're looking to create a video, or perhaps it's a podcast, and you're trying to drive more traffic back to your website to in turn get more business for yourself, then maybe we can help. We get about 10,000 people per month checking out the House Planning Help websites, and we're hoping to drive that upwards. It's all based around content, things that we make, trying to give you useful podcasts, useful videos. So look, if you want to do that for your own business, we'll put a link in for Regen Media in the show notes today. And of course, you'll be helping my garden. You could come, I could name a flower after you or something. And also the Hub, what's going down there? Oh yes, I wanted to tell you about our conference calls. So the Hub is our membership community for self-builders. The idea being that we're trying to simplify the self-build journey. But I wanted to talk specifically about our conference calls that we hold once a month. And we've come to the conclusion that it's a good idea bringing on a guest each month. You can either just ask questions about your own project. We try to get them to bring a mini presentation as well to teach us something too. So we've got Kate de Selincourt coming up. She works for Passivhaus Plus a lot, a writer who does some really good thought-provoking writing. So I'm really looking forward to chatting to her. George from Archetype, who did the self-build project Old Holloway. He won't do a podcast, but he'll come and chat to our Hub members. So that's going to be a good one. Paul Tester, he's been on the podcast before. He does all sorts of bits and pieces as well for home building and renovating. Then we've got one conference call where we're going to be live from the AECB conference. Oh, who knows who I managed to grab for that. So that's going to be exciting. And all the regular stuff, the in-depth video case studies, the courses, the forum. Check out what's on offer, houseplanninghelp.com/join. That's your lot for today. Thank you so much for listening. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.